Good day, everybody. Welcome to Highside, Lowside. This is Season 6, Episode 11. My name is Zack. Of course, I am joined, as always, by Spurgeon Dunbar. In our episode today, we've got a Not the News segment about how the KTM 790 adventure is back. We're going to give away a t-shirt, of course, and give out some sage advice from an 11-year-old. The discussion this time around will be Highside, Lowside comments. That's right. It is an entire episode addressing the comments, questions, and concerns that you, the viewers and listeners of Highside, Lowside, have. There is no guest today. The inmates are running the asylum. And after we play the Rev Trivia game at the end, we will let you go. Before we dive into this episode, though, Spurge has got a word from our sponsor, Motul.
Motul has impressed me yet again with their Motul A2 air filter oil spray. So if you've never used a foam oil filter before, the beauty of it is it's reusable. You can clean it, you oil it, and it goes back to work. And that oil helps to trap all those additional little dust particles that might get past a normal air filter and into your engine, causing harm. So on both of my KTMs, I run a foam air filter, and now I can keep it clean and tidy with Motul A2 air filter oil spray. Say that 10 times fast. You can learn more about Motul products over at RevZilla.com/Motul. That's RevZilla.com/MOTUL. And while you're there, check out the RPM program. A lot of great benefits if you are an RPM member, including free 2-day shipping. Rever Pro is given to you for free. We talked about Rever in a previous episode a little bit here. You're also going to get a content magazine sent to you. It's the Common Tread Journal. We've got 2 issues out with a 3rd one on the way. All that, and plus you also get $15 for just signing up. That will cover your Motul purchase if you so choose to get some air filter spray. Enough of all of this. To learn more, head over to RevZilla.com/RPM. And with that, let's kick things off.
Okie dokie, everybody. Time to dive into this here podcast. We will filter out all of the motorcycling BS particulates, just like that A2 oil spray, whatever Spurge was talking about. First up today, not the news. KTM 790 adventure is back. And being our staff KTM aficionado, I would like Spurgeon to explain what the heck he means by a KTM 790 returning when the 890 has already debuted.
Well, it's not just the 790. The Duke 790 is back too. The original Scalpel, as KTM dubbed their naked sport bike, has returned. So really what we're seeing here is in an effort to differentiate between the lower level, more street friendly entry kind of esque adventure bike, which would be like the base 890 before you spend more money in getting up into the 890R. What they're doing now is they're reintroducing the 790 as the engine and the platform for that. So if you want the base, no frills, probably spending most of your time on the street adventure bike in the middleweight segment from KTM, you would go with a KTM 790 Adventure. And then if you want to bump up to the higher end suspension and the more sophisticated electronics suite and other items, you would bump to the 890 Adventure R. Same thing with the Duke. The base 790 is a bit more no frills, and then you get up into the 890R and you get better brakes and steel braided lines and different triple clamps and things like that. The other thing is, you can now look at the 790 and you can buy upgrades for it. So if you really want to, you can buy a 790 and spend $1,000 or whatever it is to have the electronics suite and other things upgraded. But they're trying to create more of a differentiation between their lower level, more budget friendly products and then bumping up to their higher end stuff. Now the big difference here.
Hang on, I got a question. Does the 890 engine fit in the 790 frame? If I wanted to buy the upgraded engine, could I just put that in there?
I guess if you wanted to. I mean,
okay, that was a stupid question anyway. Move on, Spurgeon.
Yeah, well, I would say from what I understand, the frames haven't changed between the two. But the big, stupid, I like the fact that you're acknowledging your mistakes.
It wasn't a mistake. It was a very intentional, stupid question. I just figured I'd throw it out there.
Well, I appreciate it. The biggest difference here is that the bikes are no longer being made by KTM. Now, if you remember, we talked about this briefly, I think. KTM has partnered with CF Moto, which is a Chinese firm, and they will actually now be making the 790 platform bikes for KTM. Right. There's a lot of conversation around this in general, because when have we ever seen, right, and maybe you can correct me if there's some examples, but when have we seen a manufacturer bring back a motorcycle that they discontinued?
Conversation indeed. And I think that's why this is not the news, because it's not important that the model is coming back. It's not, we don't, whatever. That aspect of it doesn't really matter. What's interesting here is the fact that the production will be offloaded to a Chinese company to create that motorcycle. And it sort of, it got us thinking about what precedent there is for that. And also, should we be offended? You know, do you care? Is that something that you think, oh man, that really bums me out that they're doing that? Like people, finding out the Triumphs were made in Thailand or I don't know. I'm trying to think of other examples. The point is,
Royal Enfields are now an Indian firm. Things like that.
No, sure. Right. So Spurge, do any other things like this come to mind for you? Well, so something similar to bringing back a model or offloading one model to another company to build, and then keeping the upspec model.
Yeah, we touched on some of this briefly with the episode we did with Airy, where we talked about European blunders, and we talked about some of the trading hands there. I would say that it was really telling, because I read an article and I forget where I read it, but one of the first comments was, this might be the first time that a Chinese motorcycle is more reliable than the original, and kind of poking fun
Zing.
of the fact that KTM did have some issues with the 790 when it was originally released. I think the one example that was thrown out in the Common Tread meeting was when Triumph introduced the 660 engine. And I think it's important to note that was an engine that was based off of the 675 platform. And if I remember correctly, the 660 version of it was released in Europe originally, but we never got it in America. So when they introduced that engine into America, it was almost like they were bringing back a different version of the 675, and it's obviously become a very successful platform for them. I think, you were part of the Common Tread review where, you actually looked at the Tiger 660 Sport as, a comparison with some other bikes in that class. And I think it's a very successful story of how you can bring back an older engine and still reinvent it.
Yeah, absolutely. The other example that came up in that meeting was BMW, who didn't so much bring back a model and then offload the production to another firm, but there was the whole 750 GS and 850 GS. Or no, sorry, it was 700 GS and 800 GS, I think.
No, it was right? You were right the first time. 750
and 850?
Yeah.
Okay. So it was the same engine with the same displacement, but just one had more power than the other one, I think because of EFI tuning. Is that right? Spurge, something like that. So basically, they use the same engine to parse out a bike into two different models, and then they just called it something different. Which, again, some people thought was frustrating, but these are the ways that modern motorcycle manufacturers try to, lever all of the tools that they have to create different models and obviously increase margins and make money and be successful.
I think the bigger comparison with the BMW example isn't necessarily the engine one getting called a 750, the other one called an 850, and they make us a 10 horsepower difference between the two. I think the more apt comparison there was when those bikes were announced. I was at the press launch for that. We had it out in Moab, and the biggest question that we were getting from readers was, these bikes are made in China now. And, BMW outsourced the manufacturing for those engines, maybe the whole bikes. The engines, I know
I think it's just the engines.
Yeah, were outsourced.
I don't recall exactly.
And there was a lot of questions around that. There was a lot of concern around that because, the bikes weren't being made in Germany anymore. And, from what I can tell you is like I've ridden the snot out of a, F850 GS, and they are. I don't care where it's manufactured, the bike is quality and it works well, and it's never given me issues for the way that I thrashed it. The only issue I've ever had with an F850 GS was the steering head stem bearing kept coming loose, and I kept having to retorque that down. But
easy,
yeah.
It's funny you say that actually, because the 850 and 900 engines from BMW I've always found to be kind of like a little tinny and a little bit kind of thin feeling. They don't have the sort of I don't know. I don't know. They don't have that kind of weight and charisma in the way that they feel to me.
Really?
And maybe it's because I was.
You're not revving it high enough. That's the problem.
Oh, I see. Is that my problem?
Yeah.
That's not feedback I've gotten in the past, but I'll keep that in mind. Anyway, hopefully, this the KTM the new old KTM 790 doesn't falter or feel worse in a way that really affects KTM negatively. And we'll, as usual, let you decide how offended you would like to be, or confused or whatever about this not the news segment.
Either way, we mentioned KTM, so if you're playing the Highside, Lowside drinking game as we work our way through the comments, you can go ahead and kick off with a nice slurp of your favorite beverage. Let's move on.
Next up is the T-shirt winner, which is going to go before the comments as it always does, but not at the end of the episode as it usually does, because this whole GD episode is comments. Keep in mind. This episode's winner is from Kalen83, who wrote in and said, I'm not after a T-shirt. Just wanted to share that I really like the podcast. I listen for the content, which is always good, but I have some feedback from my 11-year-old son. On a recent ride in the truck, he said, quote, Dad, these guys are really funny. You shouldn't listen to them at 1.5x on your podcast. And then Kalen83 said, but it was at normal speed. It was not at 1.5x. And he admitted that when you're enthusiastic, sometimes you just talk fast. And we would like to give a T-shirt to you, Kalen83, in part because we like your story, but also in part because you said you didn't want one. So tough toenails, Kalen. Send us your information and we'll send you a T-shirt.
I also like the fact that we've gotten a lot of comments over the years, especially on YouTube, where people are like, you guys talk too fast. You talk over each other. It's so distracting. I hate it. And Kalen, this is the most respectful way that anyone has ever said that to us. So thank you. We appreciate it.
Right. That said, my 11-year-old was like, these guys talk too fast. So again, Kalen83, thank you for the anecdote. Thanks for listening. And we know you said you didn't want a T-shirt, but if you accidentally send your preferred size and mailing address to Highside Lowside at RevZilla.com, we'll send you a T-shirt. We can send one for your son if
we're going to send. Yeah, we'll send two. So give us whatever size you'd like, and then whatever size your son would like, and we will hook you up with two Highside Lowside T-shirts. And with that being said, it's now time to move on to the meat and the potatoes of the episodes. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages listening in pickup trucks with your dad or your mom, these are your comments. We have sourced them via email, via Common Tread article comments that you've left, because we release these podcasts over on Common Tread. We've gone through YouTube comments. We've got all kinds of comments from you, and now we're going to dive into our favorites from season 6.
You know what I realized is that I said there's no guest on this episode, and it's just you and I, Spurge. But really, the guest is our viewers.
It really is.
They are the ones who will be posing us questions and calling us out for saying stupid stuff, as we know. Comment number 1, Spurge. I think you should take this one away.
Comment number 1 from Bob Irwin 1028 says, and this is in reference to, I think it's important, we'll know, this is in reference to season 6, episode 8, the Moto Navigation episode. And it's in reference to a comment that I made about a Suzuki P-Strum. And he says, being an old Beezer rider, I believe the V stands for vertical, not VEE. So the V-Strum now has the correct engine. Well, I've got some thoughts on this, but what I think is really interesting is the commonality between Bob Irwin and my dad. And I'm wondering if my dad has an alias, because we talked about how in that episode, I had yet to hear from my dad about any comments around the V-Strum.
Well, buckle up, everybody.
Yeah, because apparently the old man's ears were tingling, and this was actually a voicemail that I got like a weekend ago.
Dude, I just heard the newest Highside Lowside, and I'm telling you, I have the answer for the V-Strom naming problem. It will be a V-Strom/P, kind of like the old BMWs did, the BMW R100/5, R100/6. This will be the Suzuki V-Strom/V, because they're going to make the old one yet for a while. And then they'll make the V-Strom/P, P for the parallel twin. And there's really no problem calling it a V-Strom because it's a vertical twin. It's up and down. It's more up and down than it is laying flat. I'm a genius. Talk to you later, bud. Love you. Bye-bye.
I like the fact that he acknowledges he's a genius at the end. Again, I think this gives the listeners great insight into the kind of messages that I get from my father on a regular basis as it relates to motorcycles.
It also does seem like, to your point, your dad calls himself Bob Irwin 1028 on the internet and is coming at us from all sides. Interesting note. What's your personal thought on this, Spurgeon? Your dad says V-Strom /P. Bob Irwin says V just stands for vertical, so V is fine. They can still call it a V-Strom. Do you agree or disagree with these?
But if they're just putting a parallel twin in it now, a vertical twin, then why were they calling it a V-Strom for all those years?
Because it's I see. Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
I for what it's worth, I was trying to play devil's advocate. I don't agree with any of these older gentlemen.
Yeah.
I don't actually know how old Bob Irwin is, but he says he's old. So fair enough.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty clear that V-Strom stands for V.
It's for V.
That that V does not stand for vertical twin ever. I've never heard that, and that's not true. And I like your P-Strom thing. I think we should start calling it the P-Strom, in fact.
There we go. And just so if you're listening and not watching, I did hold up like an L. I'm not like I know that that's a V, but like it's a 90-degree V twin that was in the V-Strom. So there you go, Zach. Zach's doing it even better. Anyway, Bob Irwin, thank you for writing in. You and Spurgeon Sr. have something in common. Senility.
There's no greater compliment than that. Comment number 2 comes in from Jacob via email. Jacob says, I've been arguing with my fiance. Who among us can't represent with that, Jacob?
Jacob, I have a fiance now. I know where you're coming from. You wrote in because you want us to tell you that you're right, and we're here to help. So, Zach, take it away.
We'll see. Jacob says, been arguing with fiance and internet trolls about the safety of riding on highways compared to city streets. Jacob lives in Miami. Jacob says, my fiance's argument is that highways are more dangerous because of the high rate of speed you are traveling. My argument is that city streets are much more dangerous because of the stoplights and constant cross traffic. Please settle this argument for me, my fiance, and the internet trolls. Okay, so Jacob's question, is it more dangerous technically to ride on highways or in urban areas? And is his fiance right or is he right?
Well, we went to our resident expert on looking things up. Yeah.
Exactly.
On danger.
Googling things.
On Googling things. So what did Lance Silver Fox Oliver have to say on this one, Mr. Quartz?
Lance quoted the NHTCA's system for recording. It's that National Highway Traffic Safety
Institute
Administration, something like that.
Yeah.
They have something called FARS, F-A-R-S, Fatal Accident Reporting System. And that data collects, unfortunately, fatalities with regard to traffic accidents, two-wheeled, four-wheeled, and any other amount of wheels. The bottom line here is that there are more fatalities in urban areas. Is that right?
Essentially, but he also goes on to say that more research is needed.
Right. So the research that I did that references the same NHTCA data seemed to suggest that there were more accidents in urban areas. So that makes you correct, Jacob.
But not only that, we are going to do more research on this. Lance actually said that he feels that this might make for a good Common Tread article. So we want you to have something tangible. We don't want you to just go back to your fiance and say, hey, these two knuckleheads on a podcast said that I'm right and you're wrong. We actually want to print off an article digitally that you can print off physically and present to her. Maybe you bind it. Maybe you put in a manila envelope. You can kind of hide it under the pillow so she finds it.
Something nice and passive aggressive. The point here is that you sort of on surface level, you are correct, Jacob, that there are more traffic accidents in urban areas. But Lance rightly points out that the FARS data only covers certain crashes, and not necessarily the broader category of injury crashes or that kind of thing. And you could certainly argue that there's a smaller chance that you will be in an accident on a highway, but of course you'll be traveling at a higher rate of speed, which inherently makes it a little bit more dangerous. So these are hard numbers to crunch. Like Spurgeon said, hopefully there's a Common Thread article following up soon with more complete research on this. The point is, what we really wanted to deliver to you, Jacob, was the good news that you can tell your fiance that you were correct according to Highside, Lowside, and there's no way she's going to check your work because obviously she's not going to listen to this podcast.
Spurgeon, that's me. Nicole loves it when I correct her passive aggressively. The other day, I gathered up all of her shoes that she left around the living room and I put them into her office. And she went upstairs to go to her office and she's like, "Why are all my shoes in the living room?" And I was like, "Well, they're one step closer to your closet now." And she actually was like, "That's super passive aggressive." I was like, "Well, did you get the point?" So anyway, Jacob, Zach, do you have a final opinion for you? Like, do you feel that you are safer riding on the highway or riding around town? Like, is there like a personal side that you lean in on this?
I feel like in general I am safer on the open road rather than around town. But I will say, we talked about this in our most recent gear episode about how when we're around town, sometimes we make compromises, you and I, Spurgeon, with our gear. Maybe I'm wearing jeans and I'm wearing good over ankle footwear, so I don't need to put on my riding jeans because I'm just going over to the store. So this is something to say against that. This is
we're contradicting ourselves.
We're contradicting ourselves to a certain extent.
Yeah.
But I will say that the low speed does make me feel a little bit better about the potential of an accident, certainly.
Yeah.
And the mean speed of accidents in some of the research I did is actually fairly low, which suggests, of course, that most of those accidents, or a large number of accidents, happen at relatively low speed, around 30 miles an hour, a little bit under, which would, of course, draw that average down. And, of course, makes it, suggests that it would happen in urban areas. Anyway,
I agree with you. So let's move on from Jacob.
So moving on from Jacob, comment number 3 is from Simon in Vienna, Austria. And this is in reference to which episode is this? The one about how many bikes is too many, right? I think with our friend Patrick Garvin. Yep. Simon says 3 bikes is the appropriate number of bikes, and asks a rhetorical question of why do you think he likes 3 bikes? Well, it turns out the Austrian equivalent of the DMV allows me to register 3 bikes under 1 license plate. That means I can have a friend ride my second bike while I ride my main one, but only have to pay registration once. Also, for insurance, I only have to pay for the biggest bike, which is calculated by engine size. So he pays for the most expensive bike for insurance, and all the bikes are covered. We, of course, did not do any research to confirm this, but if it's true, darn cool.
I have a question. So if he's allowed to register 3 bikes under 1 license plate, that means I can't have my friend ride my second bike while I ride my main one. But I only have to pay one.
I misspoke. I apologize.
Yeah. No, I was confused. I was like, if he only has 1 license plate, he has to swap back and forth. So that is what he was kind of referring to. So he can only ride 1 bike at a time. He can't go out and have his friend or his buddy or his family member ride one of his bikes. So that's the downside to it.
Right.
But the positive is that he only has to register once, and then he can just swap that plate back and forth, which is kind of cool.
Pretty slick, and a good reason to have 3 bikes.
Yeah, and if you're not, and if you don't like letting your friends ride your motorcycles anyway, it's really no loss to you.
Yeah, that's a good point. If you secretly don't want them riding your bikes, you can be like, "Oh, geez, I wish I could, but I did that whole." That's why I moved to Austria.
That's why I moved to Austria. What I like too, and I think he kind of throws this in at the end, he only has to pay insurance on 1 bike, which is pretty cool. Like you pay because they're realizing like you can't ride all 3 of them at one time. And I wonder what that means for like the theft rates in Austria. Maybe it's not a high rate of motorcycle theft, because that would come into play for insurance too. Like you can steal all 3 at one time, but you can't ride all 3 at one time.
Right. You can own 3 bikes, but you have to keep them in 3 separate garages so that you can't
lose them all at once. But thank you for writing in, Simon. I think that was an interesting one that we wanted to throw out there. If there's anybody else from Austria or Vienna that want to confirm Simon's story, we would love to hear from you.
Indeed. Why don't you take comment number 4 there, Spurg?
Comment number 4 comes in from Robert. And Robert says, while listening to the episode on motorcycle controversies, I wanted to give you guys a bit of context around European machismo. He says, in addition to helmet laws and a tiered license, in Sweden, wearing a full set of gear, so not necessarily a race suit, but you're wearing a jacket and pants and boots and a helmet, gets you a 10 to 20% discount on insurance. You just check a box when you purchase insurance, and different providers have different policies as well as rebates. So there's no legislation about wearing full gear, but because everyone likes to save money, most people wear full gear. And again, this came in from Robert, and we did do our homework work at this one. We did reach out to Robert and confirm that.
We did, but this is an interesting note, I think. Again, this is if you live in the United States and you're not having to worry about tiered licenses or discounts on insurance in Sweden, we understand. But we do think it's an interesting educational note that these other countries have these different policies. And to Spurgeon's point, we had some questions when we heard about this, right? As you might right now. Well, how does he get the discount? How do they know he's wearing gear? Can you just claim that he's wearing gear and then he can just ride around in a t-shirt and shorts and then, he gets a discount and he doesn't have to wear gear? But Spurgeon,
he checks a box.
When we wrote him.
Yeah, he checks a box, right?
Uh-huh.
And then if he's in an accident and either he or the passenger is not wearing gear, he's still covered, but must pay 10% more for the deductible. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. He then also runs the risk of paying higher premiums to pay back the full discount, and then possibly the carrier could. It seems like the carrier could kind of drop him in the future. Is that about right?
Basically, yeah. So it sounds like there's potential to pay penalties later if you are found to be claiming that you're wearing gear and not doing it, which I think sort of makes sense.
Yeah.
Anyway, there isn't a lot more to that comment than that. Basically,
Robert's also from New Jersey. So he went from living in New Jersey to living in Sweden. So it sounds like Robert's doing much better for himself these days.
Not to mention that 20% discount for wearing gear. Good for you, Robert. Comment number 5 comes in from Derek via email. Derek says, I feel you guys missed a hugely important rationale for helmet laws, only to bring it up in favor of tiered licenses. As a new rider, you're less able to understand the realities of crashes and make good risk assessment. As humans, we are notoriously bad at this, even at the best of times. After all, we ride motorcycles in the first place. Good point, Derek. But you're most likely to emulate what others around you do. And he says this is the upshot of what he's saying. Helmet laws normalize helmet wearing to the point where it's an absolute non-issue. New riders assume a helmet as a matter of course, and there's no pressure to not wear one from ostensibly more experienced and knowledgeable riders. It goes on to say, I suppose you could look back to your tiered licensing solution here and require helmets during the first 2 years of riding, but that prompts some questions. So good point, Derek. And I think this articulates one of the reasons that I like the helmet law to begin with. And I don't think I actually said it in the podcast, but I agree with you. I do think that if you just understand that in society where you live, if you ride a motorcycle, you must wear a helmet, it removes a decision that can be made, which I think is probably better for the population of people. What do you think, Spurg? Because you're sort of against this.
No.
Okay.
Yes. We'll get.
Well, you were anti-helmet law, weren't you?
So yes, it's interesting because I got a lot of feedback on this one, and I think we have some other comments later in the episode where we can dive in a little bit more. I think that for all of the comments that I saw, we did a good job of sparking conversation. I saw some really good comments and feedback on the Common Tread article. I saw some really good comments and feedback in my Instagram inbox. I saw some positive comments on YouTube. So for Derek to write in this email, I think it brings up a great issue, right? Like if we do have helmet laws, a solid pro that we both failed to mention is the normalization of this. And I think that new riders, are whether they're young or old, often face pressures that sometimes they might not be mature enough to handle. And whether that's, we're going to go fast and I don't feel comfortable just saying, hey, you know what? I'm going to hang in the back because I don't want to try and keep up with you because I'm nervous and this is way too fast for me. So they try to go too fast and then they crash, or all of their riding buddies are like, oh, you don't need to wear a helmet. That's stupid. And then they feel pressure not to do it. So I understand. I understand that pressure, and I understand what Derek's getting at. And
Sure. I feel like you're reiterating Derek's point. I feel like you're stalling a little bit. Did he change your mind about helmet laws?
I think it's a good point. I'm not going to say that I think it's a good point.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. You heard it here first, Derek. Spurgeon says he made a good point.
For the sake of conversation, I can understand where he's coming from, and I think that this is something that is worth our consideration. And I would say that if we feel that this is a better alternative for the good of motorcyclists out there, then maybe I'm wrong. Maybe.
Wow.
Maybe I'm wrong.
You hear that, Derek?
Just let that silence soak in for a minute, Derek, as we move on to the next comment. So the next comment, we're going to change gears a little bit here from...
That's a motorcycle analogy for those of you just joining us.
We're gonna shift gears away from helmet safety and the episode there for a minute, because we will come back to that later on. Topic number 6 is we have two emails that came in around a similar topic around upgrading your motorcycle. And the first one was Gonzalo. And Gonzalo wrote in and said, I have a 2009 Yamaha FZ6 and was thinking about upgrading to fully adjustable cartridges in the front fork. But after that, I would want to put in steel braided brake lines and a radial master cylinder, then a slipper clutch, then the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, until I've spent so much money that I've modified my FZ6 to a spec where I could have just bought an R6 to begin with, which already had all of those components for a cheaper price. Where do you draw the line between modifications that are worthwhile to improve the riding experience and contrast that to using the money and effort towards a new bike altogether? Zach.
Good question. So my answer here is that it depends on the situation. It depends, Gonzalo. If you have an FZ6 and you just wish you had an R6 because you just want a sportier bike, you want to go to the track, or you want to be less comfortable, or whatever it is you want from an R6 instead of an FZ6, and you just wish you had that R6. If you are going to spend all the money on the slipper clutch and the upgraded suspension and the upgraded brakes and all that stuff, and you're doing the math and you're like, just get an R6 instead, then yeah, absolutely, you're spending too much. However, I think that there's an important delineation to make, because perhaps secretly, or not so secretly, Gonzalo, you just want an FZ6 that's of a higher spec, because an FZ6 with all that stuff on it isn't necessarily worse than an R6 and more expensive. It could be better because an FZ6 is more comfortable. It's more practical.
The engine characteristics are completely different.
Sure. So if you did all that stuff to your FZ6, you might just have a hype FZ6. And maybe people with an R6 would say, man, why'd you spend all that money when you could have just got an R6? To which you would tell them, Gonzalo, I got the bike I wanted. I got an FZ6 with all the nice componentry on it, and I have a bike that is what I want, and not an R6 because that's not what I wanted.
And there's also something that speaks. So I agree with everything you just said, and I think to take it one step further, it speaks to something about us as motorcyclists where we like having something that's a bit unique from the rest, right?
Yeah, true.
It allows Gonzalo to have something that not everybody else out there has, a souped up FZ6, and right? Yes, you could have a bone stock R6, but like, nothing special by comparison.
True.
So yeah. I think it speaks to the customization of it.
Indeed. And so the comment that we got that was similar that we wanted to talk to as well came in from Justine from Norway via email, who says, I'm looking to do more touring on my motorcycle. However, I'm currently riding a Triumph Street Triple R. So that's a sort of naked sport bike. Justine says, I enjoy it, but I'm 6'2", 225 pounds, and longer rides on it can get uncomfortable. Should I modify my Street Triple or sell it and invest in a Tiger adventure bike from Triumph that would be more comfortable? So this puts a finer point on the question of what do you want to do, right? So I think for Justine,
this seems like a more practical question. Like he has a practical intention that he's looking for, right?
Right. So I want to take longer trips. Should I modify the bike that I have that isn't made for long trips, or should I just get a bike that's made for long trips? And again, we can't answer this question, specifically for the rider, because it's up to you what you want to do. But this is a case where I think you probably just get the bike that's made for going long distances, right? If you want to go farther.
So here's what I would say for this one. And it really comes down to, for all the money that you will put into a Street Triple R, the Street Triple R is never going to be quite as comfortable as a Tiger, and he doesn't specify whether we're talking about a Tiger 660 or a Tiger 900. Either way,
but it doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't matter. If you want the ultimate sport touring machine, like if you want a sport side of touring and you want to be able to really push it hard in the canyons, a Tiger is going to take a lot more to get to that level of sporty than you're probably going to be willing to put into it. So again, are you looking for comfort and luxury out of your touring experience? Easy luggage, lockable luggage, color match luggage, possibly? Like, you probably want to go with the Tiger. If you are looking for something that's an aggressive sport bike that you can also take ripping weekend rides on, you can probably mod out the Street Triple R enough to get some usability there.
It's a game of percentages a little bit, right? If you want to transition all your riding to doing longer trips, then you should just get a bike made for that. If you still want to ride a sport bike, but you occasionally want to take it on a longer trip, then yeah, you're just going to have to suffer a little bit.
Yeah, and I think it was interesting because with Justine's comment, it was definitely a little bit more like, it just felt more practical. Like, it wasn't just like, performance upgrades. It was like, I'm going to change the entire way this bike is designed to be function.
Yeah, that's fair. And like we said, we can't say for sure what exactly you want, but hopefully some of those thoughts help you make your decision there, Gonzalo and Justine.
As someone that's 6'3", 220-ish pounds, we're of a similar size, I would say learning how to stand up on the bike would probably, I know that that's not like a comfort mod, but getting comfortable if you're standing up for long stretches going down the road, and you can do it with the Street Triple R, as our body types are similar, and I've done it. It does help to give you a bit of relief on munching down long miles. So just something to think about.
Mm-hmm. Next question is from Elijah via email. Elijah says, met some guys the other night and I heard one tell his buddy that using the front brakes will flip you over the handlebars and you should never use the front brake. I haven't been riding that long and didn't feel confident enough to tell him that he was wrong, but that goes against everything the instructor said in my Learn to Ride course. Is there any validity to what the guy said? Avoiding the front brake to avoid crashing in some way.
I think we have a Instagram video that maybe we can show here that kind of demonstrates why you would never use the front brake. But no, Elijah, you are absolutely correct. You should feel confident the next time you meet up with these guys and they tell you to never use the front brake on your handlebar. That is absolutely bad information. Just bad information.
Bad information. You should definitely use the front brake.
It's like 70% of your stopping power, which you probably learned in some of your coursework.
Correct. That's just about all we have to say there. Just in case anyone out there was wondering about using the front brake.
Joking aside, we did find a video of someone trying to do a front stoppie. And, they kind of like pitched themselves forward, grabbed all the front brake, and then flipped over the handlebars. It's not that it can't be done, but it usually is done from stunt riding people doing things not that they're doing things they shouldn't do, but people that are trying to do stunts on a motorcycle that take it too far and don't know the limits of the braking threshold.
Well said. Yeah. But from a safety standpoint and, riding around all the time point of view, definitely use your front brake.
You can grab a whole heck of a lot of front brake in normal situations and not use too much and not go anywhere near the handlebars.
Spurg said, hit the front brake as hard as you possibly can. You'll be fine. Quote Spurgeon Dunbar.
As long as you have those ABS systems kicking on, you're going to be okay.
On the topic of braking, the next comment comes in from Grant via email, who says, I would like your views on the following, which are the subject of much debate and content on the internet. 1, trail braking, which as far as I'm aware is not taught in the MSF course. Safety benefits of trail braking and potential gotchas. Number 2, covering the front brake. Number 3, adjusting the front brake lever. So this is the bird shot of high side, low side questions, right? It's got a pretty wide spread here, Spurge. Where do you want to start?
Well, let's start with trail braking. So,
well, it's the first one, so that makes sense.
Exactly. We're going to go in order. Well, actually, let's start with the easiest. So the number 3 was pros and cons of adjustable front brake levers. I don't know of any cons. I think every bike should have adjustable levers for both the clutch and the brake. If you have big hands, like I'm raising my hand up right now if you're listening, I have big hands. Zach has tiny hands. So, for us, we can't ride the same bike back to back without adjusting the levers.
Look how small it is.
It's actually really good. But no, but adjustability for levers, like being able to fine tune where that sits and what you're comfortable with. Some people I know like to ride with the lever right against, you're squeezing it right against the handlebar. I like to ride it further out. So I think that from a pro standpoint, being able to adjust the brake levers to where it sits. And then there's certain brake levers where you can actually adjust the feel. Like, is it a more progressive feel, or do the brakes come on right away and hit hard? So you can fine tune some of that with some of the higher end units. So I am very much in favor of adjustable front brake levers all the way.
Spurgeon Dunbar is very much in favor of adjustability in general.
I am.
If you say this is a regular seat, or this seat has 3 positions, Spurgeon will say, I would like the one that adjusts to 3 positions just in case I need one of the other 2 positions at any time.
It only took us like 5.5 years of friendship for you to realize that about me. I like adjustability. I like tinkering with things. So Zach, let's go back to trail braking. What are your thoughts on trail braking?
So to be clear, trail braking is really just sort of any amount of braking that you're doing when you're not straight up and down, right? If you can imagine going down a road and you approach a corner, and the sort of conventional robotic way you might think about that scenario would be to approach the corner and slow down while your bike is completely vertical, while you're still traveling straight. You would slow down, and then you would release the brake, and then you would initiate your turn, and you would go into the corner. But of course, as motorcyclists, we don't do this, right? We go down this as we approach the corner, we get on the brakes, and then as we tip into the corner, we slowly release the brake. So that there's a sort of like a blend of those 2 motions, braking and cornering. And that's all it really is. And it's not I think trail braking is sometimes amplified to this sort of otherworldly level, because trail braking is what you do often when you race or when you're on a racetrack or something, because you want to brake as late as possible to brake later than the other riders. So I think people sometimes associate the term trail braking with like really aggressive, like, I'm bailing into the corner as late as possible, and I'm on the brakes while I lean over, and it's super risky. But I don't think that it is at its core. It's just like I said, a blending of the 2 things, braking and cornering. And I think you'd have to look pretty far and wide for a motorcyclist who says that that's a bad idea or ill-advised, full stop. Don't you think, Spurge?
Well, it's interesting. So, Grant, you mentioned here that it's not taught in the MSF course. I can understand that. It's something that's probably a bit more of a, at the speeds that you're going for trail braking, it's probably not something that's like a basic beginner lesson that they're trying to instill in you. What I would say is that what's really interesting is I did 2 separate articles on California Superbike School. And one of the bigger critiques for a long time with California Superbike School, which is a track school you go to and you can learn how to ride a motorcycle on a track at a high rate of speed, and that translates into being a better rider on the street. Mm-hmm. But one of the biggest critiques for a long time was that they weren't teaching trail braking, and Yamaha Champion School was, and this kind of went back and forth. So I actually wrote an article for Common Tread, which was, I believe it was like 5 things I learned from California Superbike School. And then I went back, and the second time that I took the course, they had implemented trail braking into their syllabus and their lesson plans.
Okay.
So they kind of worked it in with the understanding of like, well, we've always really taught this. We just didn't call it trail braking. It was more about just the way that we approach braking. And one of the things that I'd have to go back and reread my own article to remind myself of how they taught this. But, because so much of your, a tire only has so much threshold, and a lean angle only goes so far, and you can actually use front brake to apply, the force of the motorcycle to come down on the front tire and thus give yourself more traction. Now you can go too far and you lose the traction, but that's really what you're trying to get at with trail braking is maintain, traction to the ground and turn in faster, and then also come out of a corner and stand up faster. So there's a lot of technicality here. Would recommend checking out the article over on Common Tread. 5 more things I learned from California Superbike School, I believe was the second article. But it kind of gets into that a little bit more in depth, and it kind of talks about some of the higher end theories that are taught at race schools. But overall, I naturally find myself trail braking all the time as a rider at this point. Would you, do you not?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The last thing Grant asked was about covering the front brake. Do you find yourself doing this, Spurge?
All the time. Look at any pic, like as you're looking at that article on California Superbike School, like look at my right finger.
So you cover the front brake the whole time while you're on a track, even?
I'm just natural, like regardless of how I always have one finger on the brake lever.
Spurgeon Safety Dunbar. That's right.
It's not so much. It's not so much safety. No, that was my grandmother wanted to go safety Dunbar,
Gotcha,
but my parents overruled her. Yeah, old Nana. No, there's something about like the. And I read this somewhere, and I forget where. Probably the internet. You can't trust anything you read on the internet. The reaction time of having to go from the handlebar out to the brake lever and then brake, it's the reduction of reaction time. And I was always just trained that and I do it with both hands. I'm constantly just covering the clutch and the brake. And especially in the off-road world, where like I'm going brake, clutch all the time. What I will say, and this is where it gets hard to describe to people, because I had somebody ask me at Get On Adventure Fest this year a very similar question to what Grant was saying. Was like, how, do you keep your finger on the clutch the whole time, or do you keep your hand on the brake? And at first I was like, yeah, I do. And then I started paying attention, and I find myself like, if I'm going uphill, I find myself not covering the front brake. If I'm going downhill, I'm definitely covering the front brake. If I'm riding aggressively through corners, I'm covering the front brake. If I'm just like, so it changes. It's not like I'm doing it all the time. I know myself. I know my riding ability. I know when I'm doing it, when I'm not. And I'm wondering, by the way that you presented the question to me about safety Spurge, do you not cover the front brake when you ride?
I do. But I would never claim to do it all the time. I think I sometimes catch myself not doing it when I'll be sort of in traffic, or I'm like, on the freeway and it's sort of flowing along and everything's fine. And I realize that I don't have my 1 or 2 fingers out on the front brake lever. And I usually in that situation try and remedy that and I think it's a really good habit to try to build. So that's what I would say about it, is that I think it's a good idea. And I don't think that aiming for, perfection is you can aim for perfection. Expecting perfection from yourself is not reasonable, I don't think, but I think it's a good thing to try to do and remind yourself, when you're in a situation where everything is okay, but it could switch quickly, like an urban area where most traffic accidents happen, as we learned. Have a finger or 2 out there in that front brake, because it will reduce your reaction time. Absolutely.
So the only thing I want to throw in here too, because it sounds like Grant maybe is a bit of a beginner rider. He referenced the MSF program. And for all beginner riders listening, for those of you listening and not watching the video, when I was holding my hands up, I'm really showing just my index finger and my middle finger as my braking and my clutch hands. And the point that I want to make here is, when we talk about covering the brake, we're not talking about all 4 fingers on the brake lever at all times, which we see oftentimes with new riders, where they've got all 4 fingers on the clutch or all 4 fingers on the brake lever. And when I took Nicole out,
like Tom Cruise in Top Gun, remember?
Yeah, there you go. There's a reference there to another episode that we had done. But when I took Nicole out the first time, she had made a comment about like, oh, well, this is how they taught me how to do it in the MSF. And I think it was a good indication of not all information is necessarily right, depending on how you evolve.
Right, or it's not necessarily
right for everybody.
The right way for you to do it, because what's comfortable for you is what makes the most sense. But that's a good point, Spurge. You want when you're covering the front brake, you have 1 or 2 fingers out there, maybe resting on the lever, but you definitely have full grip and control of the handlebar. The
pinky and the ring finger is what I usually lock onto the handlebar, and then depending on how aggressive the pull is on the clutch or the brake lever that I'm riding. It's either a 1 or a 2 finger.
Quick sidebar. I rode dirt bikes with a fella in Australia one time by the name of Jeff Ballard, who's a relatively famous off-road racer from Australia. Just a peach of a human being, real nice fella, and quite a good rider. And he told me, it came up in conversations about, he puts his thumb and his index finger around the throttle, and holds there. And then the other 3 fingers, his middle finger, ring finger, and pinky, he would put on the front brake lever. And that's how he rode in off-road, to have like control of the brake and the throttle at the same time, which I thought was very strange. The only time I've ever seen that. But he's got many championships to his name. So
have you ever tried it?
Yes, I did try it.
I read this somewhere. This is not the first time I've heard it, and I remember trying it, and I could not get used to it.
Yeah, like I said, so this is one of the reasons I brought it up is that it goes to show that it's it's sort of what you're comfortable with, and works from a safety perspective is what you should do, not necessarily by the book kind of thing.
Yeah. However you do it, though, I do think giving yourself some kind of anchor point on the handlebars, whether that's your index finger, or your pinky, or whatever, is smart.
Have we talked about brakes and handlebars enough yet, Spurge, do you think?
I think it's time to move on to Dan.
Yes.
Comment number 9 of the episode. Dan says, and I'm going to go ahead and read this because I can empathize with Dan as a large individual myself. Dan says, I'm a larger rider, and I routinely have trouble seeing anything behind me on various motorcycles, even with aftermarket mirrors. I would love a rear-facing camera. Dan goes on to say, I imagine a few options here. HUD, which is a heads-up display, would be interesting. And Zach, I'll let you explain a heads-up display here in a minute, especially if the cam is integrated into the helmet so I can use it on multiple bikes. Or maybe replace the stock mirrors with a display, probably expensive and high risk for damage, even in minor crashes or drops. Or perhaps an integrated auxiliary screen or a standalone kit that can be swapped around like a Bluetooth headset. Is this a question of legality? What do you think? Is there better choices I'm missing? Could this make riders like me safer? Zach, where do you want to jump in on this one? Should we get rid of mirrors and integrate cameras into motorcycles?
Well, at first blush, I think it sounds crazy. You're thinking like, well, I'm not going to mount a camera on the back of the bike and then have a screen showing the rear view. Like, are you nuts, Dan? That's like, why would you ever? But then I reflected on it some more, and I realized that one of the things he said was replace stock mirrors with a display. And there are cars that do this now. I do not find myself in fancy new cars very often, if I'm being perfectly honest. Our household cars are pretty old, and but I have been in some cars. I don't know. I can't think of a car off the top of my head, but I think it was like a big SUV that I was in recently, like a some sort of taxi vehicle. It's like a Yukon or something like that. And the rear view mirror is actually not a mirror, right? It's a screen that links to a camera. So when you look up at the rear view mirror, you get a view behind you.
When you put the car in reverse.
No. When you're driving down the road. Yeah, like when you're driving down the highway and you go to look behind you, like we all have an instinct, right, to look up at the rearview mirror when you're driving a car, and it's linked to a camera that shows what's behind the vehicle, and it's a little bit disorienting at first because it doesn't look like a rearview mirror anymore because you're not looking out the back window of the car and over the headrests and what you're used to seeing when you look in a rearview mirror. You're just seeing a view behind the car. But is that such a bad idea? We already have our brains are already programmed to look up at the mirror, and it's showing us what's behind the car. So what's wrong with that?
I think it's a bad idea in the fact that it is a bit disorienting. So I have a 2000. I'm going to say this because I don't want people to think I'm driving around in the luxury vehicle that Zach Quartz has described.
He has a 2019 Maserati Quadriporte.
I have a 2013 Toyota Tacoma, and the backup camera in that generation was built into the rearview mirror. So when I put the truck into reverse, half of the rearview mirror turns into the camera screen.
Sure.
And that way I can look into that, and that's how I back up. I find myself still using the side the side mirrors and the actual mirror. Like, I still like having that manual process to back up a vehicle. I also think too, while you're riding around in a truck or on a motorcycle, having the cameras as the mirrors, like, that just sounds disorienting to me. And he's already, in theory, I would assume that there's some kind of it just doesn't work for me. And it sounds complicated, and it sounds expensive, and it sounds
Spurgeon likes adjustability, but he does not like change.
It sounds like what, Dan? I'm just ignoring you from now on. I'm gonna start having Bernie just block out your outbursts. I'm gonna say, Dan, you might just need mirror extenders, like little $15 jib jabs that Spurgeon Sr. have threw on his Suzuki V-Strom for like next to nothing, and it brings the mirrors a little bit taller and a little bit further out. Right. They look dorky as hell, but it doesn't sound like Dan's afraid of looking dorky because he wants to put cameras all over his motorcycle. Like, he might just need helmet or mirror extenders.
Yeah, fair enough. Dan did specify that he has trouble seeing anything behind him on various motorcycles, even with aftermarket mirrors. So it sounds like he's
aftermarket mirrors. It sounds like he did not go and buy extenders, which are again dorky and up. It sounds like he went and bought like a set of CRGs, and now he's trying to look below him. I'm just guessing.
Okay,
but
fair enough.
Dan, try some I keep saying helmet extenders. Try some mirror extenders.
A helmet extender is what Spurgeon needs to fit that big old dome inside the helmet because your head's so big.
Just move on.
Okay, I guess we'll move on.
I can't have Bernie edit out all of this stuff. My God.
For what it's worth, Dan.
No, time out. Because for what it's worth, the helmet extender thing that I'm thinking of is that stupid little piece that you can use if you want to lock two helmets to a motorcycle as opposed to just one. There's like an extender thing that goes through the double D rings. Anyway,
I don't know what you're talking about.
You've never seen it? It's like a little T something, like a little T jib jab, and you can put that through the double D ring so you can lock two helmets to a motorcycle instead of just one.
The jib jab is solving yet another problem. For what it's worth, Dan, I think the whole cameras, integrated mirrors thing has potential. I don't think that's nuts, but I do think it would be expensive, as you said, and perhaps not reasonable in the motorcycle industry, which is not usually at the cutting edge of that kind of thing. So,
let's do
good question though.
I thought it was a good question, and I'm glad that you wrote in, Dan. I think there might be a cheaper solution out there for you, and hopefully we can get Bernie to throw that up on the screen if there actually are mirror extenders still, and I'm not just making that up. So let's get in one more comment before we take a break. Zach, why don't you take comment 10?
Comment number 10 comes in from Constantinos.
What's the REM song?
No, it's They Might Be Giants.
Oh, is it They Might Be Giants?
Istanbul, Wisconsin. Yeah.
Istanbul,
Great song. Love that song.
I like that you knew exactly where I was going with that, too.
Absolutely, yeah.
Constantinos.
Constantinos says, quote, I am a school teacher. Just as I was about to return after my summer break, I tore my Achilles tendon playing basketball. Oh, jeez, I'll tell you, basketball, real dangerous. Now it seems after surgery, I will get another lengthy summer's worth holiday. I figured I should do something productive with my time. Would love to get a better understanding, of motorcycles, not just your regular easy maintenance. Do you know of or recommend any online motorcycle mechanic classes? We got a whole slew of information for you, Constantinos. Not a particularly direct answer, to be honest, but Spurge, I'll let you kick it off.
Well, so Zach and I did our homework, and we did find that there is an online university called Penn Foster, and they have an online motorcycle mechanic school, which offers motorcycle repair technician career diplomas. And it sounds like that would be something that you could do online with workbooks and digital learning that way. The other piece of information is that there was a Common Tread article called If You Want to Learn to Work on Motorcycles, Here's Where to Start. This was written by Lemmy, and it really focuses on just learning the common service manual. There's a lot of just motorcycle maintenance manuals out there that are very generic in general, and it will give you, breakdowns of what an inside of a carburetor looks like, and what an inside of a brake caliper might look like, and how to repair that. So I think there's probably some basic learning you can do just with a couple of key books. Now, from there, Zach, why don't you tell us who you reached out to?
Right. This is one of the questions for this episode that we bounced off our good friend Ari, who is our resident mechanic expert, I would say. And we would be remiss if we did not point out that you should watch episodes of the Shop Manual on YouTube, which is Ari's sort of how-to show, where he talks a lot about how motorcycles work, how to take apart a fork, how to change your brake pads, stuff like that. So you should watch those episodes while you're laid up there, Konstantinos. And also, he reiterated this idea of reading the Common Service Manual. He pointed out the article that Lemmy had written, and he said that's a great way to just familiarize yourself with how motorcycles work, what stuff like that looks inside. I mean, that's one of the reasons that Ari's a good mechanic, is that if he dives into an engine he's never seen before, it's not that he has this like innate understanding of exactly what to do. He just recognizes the stuff that he sees, right? He knows what the pieces are and he understands how they work. And that's because he's familiar with engines in general. So the way that you get, or any part of the motorcycle, the way you get familiar with any part of a motorcycle is to sort of look at it. And the Common Service Manual is a great place to start.
One final plug here as well is, if you're not familiar, Patrick Garvin has been a guest on our podcast numerous times. And Patrick Garvin over on the JP Cycles YouTube channel has a lot of great how-to mechanical knowledge that he puts into really entertaining, fun videos. Most recently, he took a Milwaukee 8 engine and like doubled the horsepower and torque by going piece by piece and showing, you know, how to replace a camshaft, a crankshaft, you know, just tore the engine down to nothing and rebuilt it. And it's an amazing 6-part video series that, if you haven't seen it yet, check out our sister channel over on JP Cycles on YouTube.
Love that. Okay. The listeners' ears probably need a break, and we probably need a quick break, don't you think, Spurge? So let's get in a quick word from our sponsor, Motul.
All right. So we are back. And we're going to kick things off with a comment from Josh. Josh wrote us an email and says, I live in an apartment on the outskirts of Kalamazoo. And I think our producer Chase edited this comment down a little bit, but Josh was paying attention and knows that producer Chase hails from Kalamazoo. So Josh goes on to say that my lease states that I cannot work on any vehicles on the property. However, management is understanding. I've gotten away with oil changes and small repairs and upgrades, but there are a large number of repairs that I simply can't do, and I really don't want to pay for them to be done at a dealership. My local dealership is expensive, and the 2 items that I have taken my bike for, I've had to redo or repair the work that they've done. Never good. I'm thinking about selling my current motorcycle in the spring in favor of an electric motorcycle / scooter or a small Honda 125cc powered machine, just for ease of maintenance and peace of mind. My question is, even though I love my bike, should not being able to maintain it properly be a reason to sell it? Zach, what do you think?
Well, I mean,
should he just get a friend like Ari Henning? Like that's how you maintain your bike, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, you know, I simply cannot bring myself to recommend giving up on motorcycling because you struggle to work on the bike, right? I don't know. What about you, Spurge? Like that seems like a big jump. I can't do it. I can't do it. Yeah. I would sooner move than give up on motorcycling myself. And I won't ask for that level of commitment from Josh. But
it sounds like Josh is using a bazooka to shoot fish in a barrel here. And by that I mean you're going to extremes. And I think that there might be some middle ground. Now, what I will say, the information that we're missing, for what it's worth to the listener, I don't know what bike Josh is riding. I don't know what maintenance items he deems to be too big to be able to do at home. Right. And I don't know what work was redone that the dealership screwed up. So there's a lot of unknowns here. The one thing I would say for Josh, and this is speaking specifically to the apartment complex that doesn't want you working on vehicles in the lot. When I first moved to Los Angeles, I lived in a small apartment building which had a very similar rule. You were not allowed to work on motorcycles. I was able, or any vehicles, because they don't want to bring down the outside appearance of their nice luxury apartment, which is
they don't
not
want grease
what
monkeys crawling around in the parking lot.
Yeah. What I was able to do is, for example, like if I wanted to have the tires, if I wanted to swap out tires or something like that, where typically it would just look like the bike was up on a cinder block and somebody stole the tires off of it. If I wanted to swap tires, I would take the bike, put it on center stand, take the wheels off, and then just cover it. So it just looked like the bike was covered. Now, it's a bit inconvenient to have to put all the pieces, take them back inside, cover the bike, then bring it all back out again. But I was able to do that and get away with it. So if it's something similar, Josh, where maybe you could go down and work on the bike and then in the interim just put a motorcycle cover over top of it so it looks like the bike is just sleeping peacefully, maybe that's a solution that you could work around with your management team, that you could still work on the motorcycle but not, draw the process out where it looks like the whole thing is torn apart and a mechanic lives there. Maybe that's a step in the right direction.
Yeah. Two other things I would say. One, I don't know. I looked around the internet a little bit and I didn't find anything super juicy. But there are co-op moto garages, which we've mentioned a few times on Highside, Lowside before. These are places that have, lifts and tools, and you pay sort of like a membership fee or a one-time fee or whatever. And you can bring your bike in, you can put it on the lift, you can do the work you want to do, and you don't have to have a place to do that at home. And plus it gives you a sense of community. Oftentimes they have classes at places like that, and they are historically, from what I've heard and seen, very positive in a motorcycle community. So that's something you could look into. Maybe you start one, Josh. Maybe that's your next career. I don't know. I'm getting distracted. The other thing that I would say is that you mentioned, Josh, you're thinking about selling your current motorcycle in the spring in favor of an electric motorcycle, a scooter, or a small Honda 125, just for ease of maintenance and peace of mind. As we said, we don't know exactly what stuff you're looking to do that you don't feel like you can get away with in the parking lot, but you don't necessarily need it to be an electric motorcycle, a scooter, or a Honda 125 for you to avoid, to have ease of maintenance and peace of mind. I think you can have, there are plenty of bikes that you should be able to ride on the reg and just sort of have turnkey, convenience, and the bike should work okay. And so it's possible that a bike upgrade would be the right thing to do. I don't know what your budget is, but it's possible that a bike upgrade would be the right thing to do, and you find something that's a little bit more reliable. But last thing I'll say, that is ignoring the fact that it's possible that you like working on your bike, that you want to work on it, that this is how you would like to spend your time. This is how you would like to spend some of your motorcycle pastime, is to work on the bike, to spin wrenches. And if that's the case, then my previous advice stands.
Yeah. So Zach made a good point there around like the some of the corporate shared garages that we've talked about. There's companies out there where you come in, you rent a space, you rent the tools, you work on your bike, you can leave it there for a couple of days and you take it away. The other option for you too, Josh, is just doing a quick Google search. There is a Kalamazoo motorcycle riders group on Facebook. And we've talked about social media before on the program as it relates to like finding people to ride with and finding motorcycle friends in your area, in your community. You might be able to find a few riders that are willing to actually share a private garage. When I first moved to Philadelphia, not having a garage, not being able to work on my motorcycles, and not having tools wasn't an option, but I also buying a house with a garage wasn't an option either during the early days at RevZilla. So we actually, a buddy of mine, Matt Broughton, who still works here, and Brandon Wise, who you know from such videos as Ride Tested, we got a garage together. It was like a standalone garage in Manayunk outside of the city. It was $600 a month. We each threw $200 a month into the pot, and we had this cool kind of a clubhouse private garage area that we each had our own little spot in. So maybe you could find a little hangout with some friends of yours, or maybe you can meet some new friends and they invite you into their already established hangout. So just another option for you to consider, Josh.
I like that. Hopefully that helps, Josh. Thanks for the email, and of course, thanks for listening.
All right.
Next up is an email from Nicole. Nicole says, on a group ride, I met a man who told me, that brand new street tires come with a coating that must be removed by riding with underinflated tires, presumably to sort of burn it off. I thought surely he was wrong until a couple other people there agreed. I know you need to be safe in the first few miles on brand new tires because there's a slippery coating that needs to be worn off, but I've never heard that you had to underinflate the tires to do it. Any light you can shed on this?
Men. Am I right, Nicole?
Classic
Am
man
I right?
explaining things and doesn't know what he's talking about.
I bet you the other people that agreed, I bet you they were men too. So, Nicole, joking aside, historically speaking, there has been a little bit of truth to the coating aspect of this. I've never heard the underinflated tires thing. I think that's, bollocks. But what I would say is that when it comes to the coating, it used to be that when tires were made in a mold, there was a coating that they used so that the rubber didn't stick to the mold. And then when you put the tires on, you had to wear that off before you went out and just goosed it. And I remember years ago at the motorcycle shop that I was working at, mechanics would install tires and then scrub them in, and I'm using air quotes right now, where they'd go out and, joyride for 5 or 7 miles on an employee's motorcycle for science purposes, and then, bring them back around. So historically speaking, there's been a little bit of truth to the coating aspect. However, we again turn to Ari Henning, our tire aficionado. And Zach Quartz, what did Ari say about modern tires?
Well, essentially, it will come as no surprise to you that the molds to make tires now don't need anything sprayed on them, as Spurge said, because they involve a coating. It's basically a Teflon-like coating, so the tires just fall out of there, and they don't have to do that anymore. Ari pointed out, rightly, that tires do include some materials that are meant to be released over time. That's sort of like weep out of a tire, antioxidants for the rubber, and that kind of thing. And it will look kind of waxy or chalky sometimes. And so if you buy an old set of tires, or if you see a bike that's been sitting for a long time, like in a museum or something like that, you might see this stuff on there. And people sometimes point to that and say, see, I told you, that's that stuff that comes out, when the tire's new, that's that stuff that's on it. It's all waxy and gross and weird, which adds to this fear of stuff on tires from the factory, and that's a very good point to make, because something like this only needs a little bit of evidence, even if it's false evidence, to like perpetuate and keep people afraid of it. But the bottom line, Ari and I commiserated about this for a minute, and having a history of road racing as we do, we often go out on the track on brand new tires, and there isn't anything to do except lean over once on either side. And it's not a bad idea to be careful with a very smooth piece of rubber, being that it's brand new, but there isn't anything really with modern tires to worry about in that arena.
What I will say is, and I think Nicole brings up a good point here, and Zach and I were going back and forth about this, is tire inflation in general. And this is something I see a lot in the adventure bike world, where, I'll be out on a ride with some beginners, and we'll come to a stop, and, we'll be talking, and usually tire inflation will come up in conversation, because that's how exciting our conversations are.
Because that's how Spurgeon starts his conversations.
Yeah. What PSI are you running? And then next thing you know, we're best friends. So oftentimes, with adventure bikes or dirt bikes, you're running a much lower PSI than what is recommended by the manufacturer for street use. Zack Quartz, when he goes to do a track day, you're not out there with, 36 pounds of air in the front and 42 pounds of air in the rear.
No, sir, I'm not.
You're reducing the amount of air that's in a tire. For the street, it helps the tire warm up faster, and it improves grip. Off-road, it helps with absorbing bumps and bruises and gives you more traction, because it can kind of dig in over all of the obstacles you come. So finding the right tire pressure for your riding style is something that has a bit of reality to it, but it's not really about scrubbing in tires.
Right. So yeah, tire pressure is a maybe a whole other podcast, you might say. But in summation, Nicole, do not underinflate your tires intentionally if they are new. You can run standard pressure in them. You can be a little bit careful if you like. But essentially, once you lean over once or three times on either side and you sort of slowly wear it in, the tires are A-okay to use. Really, the only limiting factor there is that the rubber is smooth because it has come out of a mold and it's not yet textured from having been worn a little bit. And that texture helps grip pavement because pavement is a little bit textured. But aside from that, there isn't really much to worry about there. So you go ahead and you mansplain that fella next time you see him.
Love it. So moving on to comment 13.
Lucky 13.
Andrew wrote in. And Andrew says, I'm contemplating replacing my 2007 Kawasaki Versys with another bike. I only have room for one more. So my question for you is this. If you could only pick one motorcycle to have, I know you would never ever just have one. Would you rather have a bike that is utilitarian and can carry your stuff, comfy for long trips, jack of all trades, or would you rather have a bike that has character and a little less comfort? Maybe it's more finicky, less reliable, but it brings a smile to your face whenever you twist the throttle or look at it. Great question, Andrew.
Good
Zach,
question.
Where do you lie?
Well, this just depends if you're a nerd or not, Andrew. What do you say? Are you cool? I don't know. I don't know what I'm talking about. The bottom line is it's your decision, right? You have a 2007 Kawasaki Versys, which I think most people would agree is perhaps
Nerdy is the word you're looking for.
more. Well, no, I was going to say more in the former category that you laid out, Andrew. A utilitarian, carry your stuff, comfy on long trips, jack of all trades, that kind of thing. So perhaps you're thinking, do I get something that's a little sexier, a little bit more fun? But you lose some of that practicality. And I think this is a great question from Andrew because it is so universal and evergreen. This question will be asked again and again. We'll probably cover it again at some point on Highside, Lowside, because this is the whole thing with bikes, right? Every one that you get is a compromise for something, probably. Like you're either compromising on comfort, or you're compromising on style a little bit, or you're compromising on the amount of money you wanted to spend or something. And I don't know that it's an easy question to answer. I think this is another case where the grass is greener. If you have a Kawasaki Versys, it's easy to look at a Ducati Scrambler or a BMW R9T or something like that and think like, oh man, like that's so cool. Like I wish my bike was cool like that. But then who knows, if you had one of those bikes, you might see some guy cruise by on a Versys and be like, man, look at all that luggage space and look how comfortable he is. I don't know. Do you see an easy answer to this question?
Yeah, the answer, and I can't believe you walked right by it, is to buy a KTM because KTM gives you everything. You have the versatility, you have the travel, you have the performance. It's really a KTM.
And they're also
KTM 890 Adventure
beautiful.
R. I mean, I just look at mine all day long and think,
right.
Wow, this is just aesthetically pleasing.
Don't you look at that 890R Adventure? Don't you think, what a beautiful, beautiful shape it is. What a stunning silhouette it has. What a beautiful face.
Sharp, aggressive lines. Really,
That's one way to put it.
I would say, so first of all, Spencer Robert, who has been a guest on the podcast before, would probably disagree with you that the Versys is not a sexy motorcycle. I think he finds.
To be fair, Andrew didn't say that.
No, you did. You said it wasn't a sexy motorcycle.
I did say that.
And I'm saying Spencer Robert would probably not agree with you. That man, he likes a good Versys.
He does.
I would say that, Andrew, if I were between the two, I probably fall towards the category of utilitarian. I do have a soft spot in my heart for the Bonneville, but the Bonneville is something that I can also do a little bit of everything with. I can ride it not like a sport bike, but I can ride it relatively sporty, and I can put luggage on it, and I think it's great to look at, and it's got engine character. I feel the same way about the 890, joking aside. Like, the 890 is something that I think is very utilitarian in the fact that I can ride it to get groceries, or I can also take it to the Pine Barrens. I don't hate the way it looks, if I'm being honest with myself, and
yes,
it's also
you do.
and it's also
does.
pretty fun to twist the throttle on. So I think there might be bikes out there, Andrew, that split the line a little bit, where you don't have to sacrifice one for the other. That's all I would say.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I'd say follow your heart, If you just feel the draw, you feel the pull to that cool bike that's maybe not as comfortable, heck and do it.
Get an S1000 XR, and I think you'd be very surprised at how practical and utilitarian it could be, and also how god awful fast it'll make you feel like you're going.
Indeed. Well, on this is sort of a tangential topic here. Comment number 14 comes in from Daniel via email, who said, I've noticed my riding attitude changes depending on the bike I ride. On my Versus 650, I ride conservatively. I obey traffic laws. I don't feel like speeding. I don't have a desire to participate in any hooliganism. On my KLR, I want to go off-road and abuse the heck out of it. Taking it through the woods, drowning it in mud. On my H2, I find myself speeding everywhere. I ride aggressively. I'll do stoplight drags with others and act like a bit of a degenerate. Daniel's question is, do you think bikes have a, quote, attitude that they impart on their rider?
Absolutely.
Spurgeon Dirt. Yeah. That's right.
Yeah. I mean, like we could just stop it right there. But I agree with you 100%, Daniel. There's definitely some bikes where you hop on and you're like, it's just fun to putt around on. Like that little CSC that I did an article on or a video on about like the motorcycle under $2,000. I enjoyed riding that little CSC 250 around. It was a fun little 15, 20 horsepower, nothing bike, but just bopping around town. It was fun and nerdy, and I loved every second of it. But if I get on something like my 890, I'm with you, man. Like I want to ride it like you want to ride your KLR. And I find myself like coming back through town covered in mud on the bike, standing up on the handlebars while I'm riding through Main Street in Manayunk. And people are like, why is that idiot doing that? I'm just like,
Did you say standing up on the handlebars?
Yeah. And I meant what I said.
I didn't realize that you could do that.
As long as I don't grab the front brakes and flip over the handlebar, I'll be okay.
Nice. Yeah, Spurge is right, 100%. Bikes do have an attitude. This is so much of what reviewing a bike subjectively is, and I think trying to transmit that's what Spurge and I write a fair number of motorcycle reviews over the course of our months and years at RevZilla for Common Tread, and that's a lot of what we're trying to transmit, right? We're trying to tell people what the bike feels like to ride and what it will encourage you to do and what it will not encourage you to do, because people want different things. You might really like the feel of an aggressive sport bike, or you might think, if I have an aggressive sport bike, I'm going to do things that I shouldn't do. So instead, I'm going to get something that's more calm because that will calm me down. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about motorcycling is I think that there's so much kind of character and emotion transmitted through each and every machine.
I mean, well said. We're talking about the beauty of the machine. And I think with that, Daniel, we've answered your question. Thank you for writing that one in. We liked that one a lot. We were going through pre-production, and we both enjoyed that comment quite a bit, which takes us right into comment 15. Aaron, is this... Aaron said, I'm going to read the first part of this one. I'll let you take the second half, Zach. Aaron wrote in and said, and this gets back to what we were talking about earlier with, like, I've gotten a lot of comments on the helmet episode. I appreciate that the Spurge is pro-helmet while also being anti-law. I would like to go on record and say that for whatever misunderstandings have happened between us, me and you, the audience, I'm not anti-law. I just feel the need to throw that out there right now to any listeners that might have gotten the impression that for whatever reason I'm sitting up here with like an anarchy patch on my backpack the way that I was when I was in 7th grade with a chip on my shoulder.
I think maybe what Aaron was talking about was that you are pro-helmet, but you are anti-helmet law. Not anti-law, full stop.
Yeah,
just
the way that he wrote this was...
That's true. It's good to clarify.
While also being anti-law. So, yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, Zach, why don't you read the rest of the...
You heard it here first.
Read the rest of the comment for us.
Spurge. Aaron would like to add another viewpoint to the equation. Aaron says, a universal helmet law could theoretically increase the cost of a helmet. Once legal minds start requiring a helmet, they will have to define what a helmet is by qualifying what a, quote, safe helmet is. This could potentially increase the cost of the user by forcing manufacturers into particular guidelines and put through another testing parameter that is state sanctioned. My final thought on the matter: a good idea shouldn't require force to be applied. With good education and a changing outlook on the practice, I believe helmets will become the norm universally amongst all riders. Interesting. So Aaron basically thinks that if you make helmets universally mandate, like everyone must wear a helmet, then eventually there'll be all these regulations that that helmet manufacturers have to follow, and it'll cost a lot of money, and then helmets will be really expensive.
They already do. It's called the Department of Transportation. You have to have a DOT sticker. They have to pay to have that sticker added, and then the DOT can test at any time to make sure your helmets comply with that. Most manufacturers, have their helmets comply with SNEL or ECE or FIM. We got into this with Pat McHugh last time. Mm-hmm. To have that sticker added to a helmet, it costs a lot of money for the manufacturer. So Aaron, I appreciate you taking my side, or at least acknowledging the fact that
ostensibly,
you appreciated my point of view here. But I would say that I don't see any other ancillary charges or increased costs coming from this, because it already exists. I will say that a lot of you that have been writing in have made me realize that I think. To his final point here around like a good idea shouldn't require force to be applied, I think sometimes it does in 2023. I think sometimes just trusting that people will do the right thing, or people are automatically going to choose to wear a helmet, is probably naive on all our parts, including myself. And again, speaking to my thoughts and my comments on the helmet episode, I think it's very easy in practice to say, hey, I don't want a helmet law. I want to trust that people are going to do the right thing because I do. And then it's like, well, what's the right thing in my mind versus what's the right thing in Zach's mind versus somebody else's mind. So I think it's a slippery slope, and it's definitely been a episode that I've gone back and re-listened to, and it's definitely been an episode and some thought that I've probably reapplied to my original position based on what I've heard and read from you, the audience out there.
Fair enough. There you have it. I agree, Spurge, that I don't think that helmets will get more expensive if there are more laws necessarily. I mean, conceivably, theoretically, Aaron makes a point that there could be wild new regulations that cost tons of money, and then every helmet would be $2,000. But I don't think we're sort of past that point. I do think it's optimistic that. Go ahead.
I was just saying, ECE is a European regulation, the way that DOT is here. So like, again, I just want to, I think sometimes we look at ECE as a safety rating that's like arbitrary. It's not. And you have to have your helmet regulated by ECE to sell in the European Union. So we're already dabbling in this world. And then that's, I'll leave it there.
True. Last thing I was going to say is I think it's optimistic to think that with good education, people will, just put on helmets, which I think is true. But also, it's just, I don't know. I think it might be better to help people toward that decision.
A lot of us went to high school. Not all of us can read so good. So, yeah.
All right. Next comment is from Stephen in Australia, I believe. And this is a doozy. So bear with us, everybody. Are you cool? Should I read this, Spurge? Do you want to take it?
No, the more of the words, the better for you to read, says I.
Says I, who went to high school and reads good.
Yeah, exactly.
Stephen says, in my state of Queensland in Australia, tiered licensing is called LAMS. That's an acronym, LAMS, Learner Approved Motorcycle Scheme. Stephen goes on to say, new riders must have a car license for a year before getting a restricted motorcycle license, which must be held for 2 years before getting an open license, basic tiered license program, as we've discussed before. A restricted license allows you to ride anything under 250 cc's or a list of specific motorcycles over 250 cc's that have been approved. The specifics are a little opaque, but it seems like there's power approximately cut off at 50 horsepower. Stephen says, overall, he agrees with the system, but there are a few unfortunate effects that he's noticed that we did not touch upon when we talked about tiered licensing on Highside, Lowside. Stephen says that because the Australian market is so small, many manufacturers only sell detuned versions of their bikes so that they can be included in that LAMS list, learner approved scheme. So he gives some examples: Kawasaki Versa 650, Z650, Triumph Tiger 660, Honda CBR 650R. And so these are bikes that would have more power were they not subject to these regulations. He goes on to say, eventually you can convert them to full power, but there are registration and insurance complications. So Stephen says there's no, for some people, there's no way to get a 68 horsepower Versus that our friend Spencer Robert would love so much without jumping through a bunch of hoops. And the upshot of all this, the reason we give you all this background, is that Stephen thinks beginners are affected by this whole mindset, that people who are new to motorcycling will think that small bikes are worse because of this, and says, what does it say here? I've got nothing against people seeking power, but I disagree with the apparent conventional wisdom that views mid-sized bikes as learner or beginner bikes only. Not that I care too much about what people think of me riding a 650, but I worry that younger riders do care about those things, and I think that the two-tiered structure probably contributes to that. So, again, complicated, long comment, but very good information from you, Stephen. We do appreciate it. And this is a we think an intelligent take on the tiered license system, because we are pro tiered license. We thought it was a good idea, but you do make a good point that in some ways you can pigeonhole certain types of bikes, or even, styles of bikes or types of riding. And then people will not approach them because they think that they're lesser.
I think the other thing to note here too is that when Zach and I were talking about this in the episode regarding tiered licensing, one of the things that we really liked about it as we were building out our dream scenarios is that with a tiered licensing system, you could get your motorcycle license first at a younger age. So at 14, you could be riding around a little 50cc scooter, which would encourage more people to ride a motorcycle in the long run. It sounds like Stephen is saying that the opposite is true there, where you actually have to have a driver's license first before you can ride a two-wheeled vehicle. And then you're 2 more years of restrictions. So it doesn't sound like the tiered licensing system is being used in the way that Zach and I would have it be if we were in charge of these things. Yeah. And for what it's worth, Stephen, I agree with you. And this is kind of what I was getting at in that episode, is that I think that, people just don't understand what 68 horsepower Versys can really do, right? And how much fun that bike is to ride. Then it's the point that I made with the Bonneville, like a street twin. And somebody else wrote in, and this one was not a comment that we picked, but somebody else wrote in and was like, you're absolutely wrong. A street twin makes too much power. It wouldn't fall into the tiered licensing system. And I'm a big rider, and you could never ride a street twin long distance. Well, I'm a big rider too. And I've taken cross-country trips on street twins in Bonneville. So my point is that there's a lot you can do with small displacement motorcycles. They're not just for beginners, Stephen, and I appreciate you reiterating that fact.
Indeed. Yeah, good. Like I said, good, intelligent comment. Appreciate it. What do we got here? Comment number 17 comes in
Michael.
From, what's that?
Michael,
correct. Michael says, how about your show taking on the licensing and registration of e-bikes? Right. Michael's got a bone to pick. Now I remember this. E-bikes, I think he's referencing electric bicycles, right?
It's electric bicycles, yes.
He says these are becoming basically motorcycles, but with no accountability, licensing, or registration. They cruise by, quote, no motor vehicle signs and hiking trails without a thought. Michael goes on to say that he has seen multiple abuses of this, almost getting hit by electric bikes on a hiking trail. And Michael says this sort of behavior is one of the greatest threats to motorcycle access to lands, and it pisses everyone off. And since there's no individual recourse, many will now generalize their anger in support of land closures who didn't care before. This also encourages building fences and barriers to exclude bikes in general. Michael says he thinks e-bikes of any sort should be plated so their riders can be held responsible for behavior like the rest of us. We will pay the price as motorcyclists for their misbehavior if we do nothing. What do you think, Spurgeon?
Well, maybe if these e-bike riders continue to act a fool, they'll just open up all these trails for licensed motorcycles instead. Huh?
That seems optimistic.
Yeah,
I think
very
Michael is right
optimistic.
to be concerned about this.
Yeah.
I think that this is an interesting gap that's being bridged in the two-wheeled world now, right? There's always been a very clear delineation, aside from a moped, which is a motor pedal bike, like a scooter with pedals, basically. Aside from a moped, there's always a pretty clear delineation between bicycles and motorcycles. But what with electric motors being put on bicycles, the line's getting pretty blurry. And at some point, it's a lines are being drawn. Like there's the whole throttle thing. Like you have to pedal assist. You can't use just throttle. But like it's getting really tricky to tell the difference. And I think Michael's got a good point.
It's this gets back to the whole anti-law Spurge fighting inside my head with the law-abiding Spurge.
Anarchy Dunbar.
So if we just got a chance to ride the new STACYCs, which are aimed at like kids, but like larger kids, like you can be up to like, I think 175 pounds, and they scoot like so much fun. And they're not pedal assist. Like that's like pull back on the throttle and watch her go. So I think that Michael raises a great point here, that I am surprised that we have gotten this far in America anyway, without any kind of regulation on some of these e-bikes, whether it's, e-mountain bikes, which are pedal assist, or it's, just some of the Super 73 or STACYC, throttle with optional pedals or no pedals at all. And there's really nothing regulating these vehicles. So I can take my nephew and we can take the STACYCs out to a park and ride around a baseball diamond. And the flip side of that is when we brought Nicole's 230L home, a little Kawasaki, she was like, oh, can we just go to the park and I can ride this around on the football field of the high school? And I was like, absolutely not. Like that we're going to jail. Like that's not going to, like they will take the bike away. Right. I do think it's like Nicole was asking you to do the same thing. She's like, can I just take my little 230 dirt bike and just ride back and forth in a straight line to get comfortable and learn how to ride? And I had to tell her no. However, if we went down there with a STACYC or a Super 73, she could ride back and forth all day long and nobody would really question it.
Right. True. Well, I would like to address the other part of this. I think that this is a good point to bring up, and I don't know what the answer is. I think that some regulation does need to happen at some point because, well, I don't know if it needs to happen. I think that the what were we trying to say?
Left to their own devices, the scourge of society will ruin this for everybody.
Yeah, I think that's one way to put it. I also think that this rise in popularity of e-bikes does not, or if anything, it undermines or downplays the danger involved with vehicles like this too, right? Like, oh, I'm just riding a bicycle around. Like it's a little electric power extra, e-assist bicycle, no big deal. And the trouble you can get in under your own pedal power on a bicycle is immense, as I learned as a teenager. And so if you have extra power to get into trouble, there's really, they go fast and you can hit jumps even faster and you can get yourself in even more trouble. So I think aside from, screwing up hiking trails and being annoying to the rest of society, as Michael points out, it's a false sense of security to have vehicles like this classified as bicycles when they really hold a lot more potential than that.
I think it's well said. And one of our throwaway comments that kind of ties into this, we had gotten a separate email from David, and in our season 5 listener comments episode, we had made a comment about the Whizzer motorcycle kits from back in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, where you strapped a little engine onto your bicycle. And David wanted to point out that you can actually still buy a Whizzer kit, and he sent some examples from Amazon where you can actually just strap a 2-stroke motor onto your existing bicycle if you don't want to spend the e-bike prices. And that's going to open up a whole other can of worms about what can you legally get away with. So
fair enough. Yeah. That's a
whole other podcast.
Indeed. Okay. Well, we are on to our final comment
before
the
playing
podcast.
the engine sound guessing game, because
Right.
folks, we know
Obviously.
that in season 6 we have created a new phenomenon that you all appreciate. So we're going to get to the engine sound guessing game in just a second, but the final comment is from David. It's a long one. I will go ahead and I will read this. It's going to take a minute to get through, so sit back, relax. Unless you're driving, don't do that. Pay attention to the road in front of you. Adam wrote in. Let me clear my throat. And says, I think you gentlemen, thank you, Adam, might be the ones to help me with my moto dilemma. At some point in the late 70s, my father, 20-something at the time, purchased a basket case. As in literally it was in baskets having been wrecked. 1972 Kawasaki H2 Mach 4. An aircraft mechanic by trade and a reckless dip by nature, he was best description of a father I've ever read in my entire life. He was undeterred by the slightly tweaked frame and shortage of parts and proceeded to resurrect the Widowmaker as only he could. Lacking an ignition, instead of a key, it sported an aircraft master switch along with several hidden kill switches scattered throughout the wiring. He was able to mostly, quote unquote, straighten the frame enough to get him to an indicated 118 miles an hour, provided that he hung one butt cheek off the seat. That was so that the bike wouldn't wobble, because apparently the frame wasn't too straight. Not to be inconvenienced by something as trivial as Illinois winters, he built a custom sidecar using the tail section of a plane so he could make the hour-plus commute to O'Hare more or less vertically. We do have a picture, by the way, to show for this. It didn't take long after my birth in 1983. Congratulations, Adam. We were both, I think all three of us were born in 1983, so good year. Before my mother decided to fly the sidecar with my older brothers in it. Before she decided that flying the sidecar was a bit sketchy, even for the 80s. There you go. So mom was putting a kibosh on things, and the bike was parked in a dusty barn, never to move under its own power again. My dad never rode again either. And although I've spent most of the last 39 years on two wheels, I now have a conundrum. A couple of years ago, after my dad passed away, my stepmom found the title for the H2 and decided I should have it. It being a personal history-soaked classic motorcycle halfway across the country, which hasn't run in 40 years. One that was a death trap from the factory, not at all improved by my mad scientist of a father going all Mad Max on it. So this is not the bike for me. I don't want an H2. But I can't bring myself to let this go. So tell me, please, Zack Spurgeon, what would you do in my shoes?
Whew. Humdinger. So, an heirloom classic motorcycle that objectively Adam does not want, but subjectively he has fond memories of it, of his so-called dip father and his what seems like fun childhood, and yeah, his love of two wheels, which presumably grew from that. It's a tough one, Spurge. It's a real tough one. I think I'll start and I'll say that you got to keep it. You got to keep it. And I think that I don't know if you have ever ridden an H2, Adam. I don't think I have, come to think of it, but I bet that if you got that bike and got it running, either spent the money to have someone fix it up or dove into it to yourself if you feel like a capable enough mechanic, and you actually heard the thing crack to life and swung a leg over it, and maybe you ditch the sidecar. I don't know. I'm not going to tell you how to live your life, but you take a spin on that bike and you have it around. I think you'll be glad to have it, and I think it will stir up and let memories resonate around in your soul in a way that no other bike could. And I don't think that you should give up on that, even though you don't really want it as a machine. I get it.
I agree with Zack 100%. I think you have to keep it. I think that's probably easier for us to say than to do because we're not the ones that have to pay for the restoration to get it transported out to where you live now. But I'm also going to throw something else out there, Adam. Why don't you consider letting us borrow the bike and maybe we'll do some content around it? Maybe Ari Henning can do a shop manual episode on restoring a mad scientist of a sidecar. Maybe we do a CTXP episode on it. I mean, like we were talking about doing a beginner bike episode. Like, why not? I mean, this screams beginner bike to me. It was a beginner bike for his dad. It could be a beginner bike for you out there, audience.
Yeah.
I'm just saying. I mean, the idea is the juices they're cooking. But no, I think that regardless of whether or not you want to, donate the bike to the RevZilla, shenanigans warehouse, I think you have to keep the bike. I think it's going to be something that if you don't, you're going to wish you did. And I would say keep it as a sidecar rig. And maybe it's just a novelty that, one day you're taking your kids or your nephews or your nieces out for a ride around the block, and maybe you're not, floating the sidecar in the air the way your old man did, but maybe you're just, having some respectable fun. But I think keeping it is what you have to do.
Agreed. And I would say that if you keep it and you get it running and you ride it and it doesn't do anything for you, then someone out there will be happy that it's running and they'll buy it and love it. And that'd be a good thing.
Call us first before you just sell it to somebody else.
Nice. All right. Well, a great email, Adam, a great question, and a great photograph of your childhood. So thank you for sharing all that with us and with your Highside, Lowside viewing audience, brothers and sisters.
Yeah. Speaking of sidecars, though, if you haven't watched the most recent episode of CTXP, very sidecar focused.
Indeed.
And nostalgia. It's a nostalgic episode as well.
And nostalgia. I have my own fond memories of my dad flying the chair, as they say. All right.
Time out. I'm one question for you.
Okay.
Obviously, you and your wife live in Southern California. Your dad lives in Vermont.
Yes.
What were to happen if your dad were to leave you the BMW with the sidecar? Is that something that you want to hold on to and bring out and put in your garage, or what would you do with that?
Good question. Mercifully, that does not belong to my dad. Technically, it belongs to his friend Tom, who stores it in one way or another, sometimes at my dad's house, which was too complicated a notion to explain in the CTXP episode. But point being, I shouldn't have to make that decision, I don't think. But to get to the root of your question, I do think, I don't like to think about it much, but I do think there will be a day when I will have to decide what to do with some of my dad's motorcycles. And there are one or two that I think I feel the same way I feel about Adam's situation. I just won't be able to give it up. I gotta keep it. I gotta do something with it. And I don't think that it will be all the way well received in the household to have another motorcycle around. But I think that my roommate will understand the sentiment of it.
Yeah. I mean, luckily I don't have to deal with that because my dad is just using my motorcycle. So at some point, presumably I'll get my motorcycle back from my father. So
excellent. All right. Well, let's do one second to last Rev Trivia engine sound game for the year. This will be
the penultimate engine sound guessing game, if you will.
Nice. Good vocab. So yeah, we're gonna the way this works, in case season 6 episode 11 is your first episode of Highside Lowside, the way this works is we play a sound of a bike. You play along with us. We have not heard this engine sound before. We try to figure out what the bike is. If we can't do that, we get some hints, and you shout in your cubicle or in your car or on your motorcycle, wherever you are listening to this, about how wrong we are.
I have I have the hints ready. I have my mouse ready to play the sound. So whenever you're ready, Mr. Quartz, I can go toe to toe with you.
3, 2, 1. Start your engines. Well, Spurge, what are you hearing?
I mean, that starter was struggling there in the beginning. Big.
All right, how many cylinders does it have?
2.
Yes, correct. Is it a V-twin or a parallel twin?
That's what I was.
It's a tough.
Because initially it sounds like a parallel twin, or it sounds like a V-twin, but then when they start to rev it, that's where I was getting
Now,
confused, to be
I think
honest with you.
It's a 270 crank parallel twin or a V-twin. And it's a tough one. I'm gonna go KTM 790.
I'm going to go Triumph Bonneville T120.
Wow, that's okay. All right, okay.
Because
Let's get a hint.
it sounds bigger to me, yeah. So the first
Okay.
hint, and so that's my guess. Zach's got his guess in here. The first hint is, liquid-cooled 60-degree V-twin.
Ah, okay.
So we're both wrong.
We're both wrong. It's an Aprilia. It is an Aprilia RSV Melee or an Aprilia Tuono 1000 circa 2006, 7, 8, 9. That's my guess.
I was
Very
gonna
broad.
I was gonna ask what degree V-twin is in the Indians. But it definitely sounds more performance oriented to me. So
Yeah, what degree? Oh, it could be an Indian, but
I was thinking like an Indian. Yeah, I was thinking like an Indian scout or something. But
Yeah, that could be right. Let me listen to it one more time. Yeah, I don't know. It sounds a little too peppy, a little too sport oriented for me. But
no, I'm with you. I think it does sound sportier. That's why that's why I went with the Triumph to begin with.
But
All
we've
right.
been wrong before, and by wrong before, I mean we've been wrong basically every time we've played this game. So what's the second hint?
Only 4,000 built.
Ah, so probably not an Indian Scout.
No. But
Only 4,000 built.
Aprilia could be correct
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna go with I don't know, with a Tuono factory. I don't know, 2000 something 7.
Project 156.
It was an Indian. Holy Moses.
I don't think so. So I was wrong. It is a Victory.
Basically the same thing.
That's where I'm giving myself a few. I'm giving myself a few bonus points there.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is a 2017 Victory Octane. So keep in mind, Victory was the motorcycle company that Polaris had before they how do you say brought back from the dead? Before they recreated the Indian brand.
Rejuvenated,
resuscitated. That's the word I was
Resurrected.
looking for. Samsonite. I was way off. 2017 Victory Octane with the Victory Stage 1 exhaust.
Yeah.
Victory used a new 1200cc V-twin engine built by Roland Sands in the 2015 Pikes Peak International Hill Climb. Development of this engine was codenamed Project 156, and Victory developed the Octane engine from Project 156. I want to thank Daniel for sending this in to us.
Do you know why they called it Project 156?
I do, but I forget.
I believe it is because there are 156 turns on the way to the top of Pikes Peak.
Well, there you go. That makes a lot of
you go.
sense. But a Victory Octane by any other name would have been an Indian Scout per se.
It would have been, yeah. The Octane was sort of like the sort of like relatively high performance cruiser kind of thing, feet forward, but spicy sort of cruiser. I remember riding that bike around and liking it. I'm not historically a cruiser guy, but I liked that bike, and the engine was peppy, and by gosh, it fooled me. I thought it was something European.
So
but it was
I would
actually
just say,
homegrown.
if we're keeping score, while neither one of us won per se, I would say that I probably came closer than
You
the
did.
Aprilia Mille guess that you threw out. So
That's true. And by one, you mean you said I want to say Indian, but I don't think that's right. I'm just stupid and ugly.
I'm sitting over here and I am just, I'm just patting myself in the back. If you're listening and you can't see this, I'm very impressively flexible with patting myself on the back. So thank you again to Daniel for sending in the engine sound guessing game, or sending out the engine sound for the guessing game. Keep in mind, if you want to do this, make sure you get the bike starting, idling, give us a couple good revs, and then letting it idle on through. We need at least 30 seconds of the clip to be able to use it. And then we will make sure that Daniel gets a little something for his efforts. So
Indeed. If you don't have an engine sound, but you'd like to leave a comment for us, you can, of course, do that. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can do that below. If you are listening to the podcast, please do send an email to Highside, Lowside at RevZilla.com. With any comments, questions, concerns that you have.
It makes the comments episode a lot easier, folks, when we have comments to read, and there have been some awesome contributions this season. So thank you to everybody that has left us the comments on YouTube or shot emails, because Zach and I very much enjoy the comments episode, and we're looking forward to potentially maybe even changing things up a little bit in season 7. From a comment standpoint, there's been some ideas thrown around about possibly doing it live, but I don't know. It might be able to bring it back, might not. Who knows? So either way.
So we've come to the end of season 6, episode 11 of Highside, Lowside. Spurge, you got a what did you learn? What's your chin stroking moment looking back on this podcast? What did you what piece of what little nugget did you come away with this episode with? Anything there?
I need to be more responsible with my words, because people sometimes take what I say and really listen to them, and that concerns me, because this is more so than anything an entertainment podcast, and there's a lot of people out there rallying behind my lawless ways, and I have to use my platform much more responsibly. So,
right.
Well,
that's my big takeaway from this episode, is that I did not know that you don't believe in government and you think that everyone should just have to completely fight for themselves.
I would love. Here's my challenge for you as we look at the final episode of season 12 coming up. When you do a reflection at the end of these episodes, if you could do one where your reflection isn't about my degradation, that would be delightful. Like, maybe you could be introspective for once and be like, you know what I learned about myself in this episode?
I don't learn anything about myself. Look, last time I called out the fact that you brought up a sort of rare and strange Japanese SUV in the middle of the episode, which I thought was really...
I got it wrong, though. It was an Isuzu, not a Suzuki, so I appreciate that.
True enough.
Yeah.
Anyway, well, I hope that you all enjoyed our reflections on your comments and your questions, and we do so appreciate having such an engaged listenership. So please keep your comments, your questions, your thoughts coming at us, and we will see you next time on the season finale of season 6.
It'll be episode 12. Season 6, episode 12, coming soon. Adios.
Later, everybody.